All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Advancing Practice workshop. Today we are talking about the science of burnout prevention, how to manage stress and maintain mental well-being. Now, before we get started today, if you're using a screen reader, please private message our Zoom host, Amy Hintz. Live auto transcription is also available, so if you'd like to use it, just go to Live Transcript or More in Zoom and select Show Subtitle. We are recording the presentation, and the recording will be added to the Advancing Practice website and also to the BCal event description after the session. Just a quick note, please keep yourself on mute throughout the presentation as well. And Amy, did anybody message you?
No one has messaged me.
Okay, great. All right, so feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, name, pronouns, positions, what brought you here today. And also feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. My name is John. I work for the Math Department. I'm a graduate advisor. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also a member of the Advising Fellows program. And my co-host today is Candace. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Candace Rogers. I'm a career and internship specialist with the School of Public Health. Along with John, I am also a member of the Advising Fellows and super excited to be here.
All right, great. Thanks, Candace. So before we get started today, we always like to start off with a land acknowledgement. And so I'll be reading that off. The Native American Student Development recognizes that UC Berkeley sits on the territory of Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. As a member of the Berkeley community, it is vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also we recognize that the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of Berkeley and the broader Bay Area communities today. And if you want to learn more, you can go to ohlone.berkeley.edu. Let me put that in the chat as well. All right, thank you. And now without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Sahar Yousef. Dr. Sahar Yousef is a cognitive neuroscientist, as well as the youngest faculty at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. She teaches one of the most popular MBA classes called Becoming Superhuman, the Science of Productivity and Performance, and has been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Wired, and Business Insider. Outside of the academic world, Sahar co-runs Becoming Superhuman, a training and consulting firm which teaches busy professionals who think for a living how to get their most important work done in less time and with less stress. And so without further ado, I'll pass it off to Dr. Yousef.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. And Candace, really excited to be here with you all today. I see that folks are still filing on in, but we have a lot of ground to cover. I get really excited when I'm given an opportunity, and I know a few of you know this already, but although scheduling wise, like all of us here today, rather slammed, but I remember getting that email, and then when I heard that it was for the advisor community, that kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, well, we're gonna have to find the time to do this. So we're moving things around. I am a triple bear. I was born a few blocks south of campus. I went to Cal for undergrad, for graduate school, and now I teach there. And without my advisors, I would not be where I'm sitting today. The advisors that I was lucky enough to have, who are actually, most of them have all moved on from the campus community, really paved the way for me and helped me develop my journey throughout my undergraduate years and my graduate years. So I wanted to just, on behalf of every student that you've ever advised, if they've never reached back out, to say thank you, thank you. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump into some of the content on preventing burnout. Having said that, I have the ability to talk pretty fast, and I'm going to try my darndest to talk as fast as possible because there's a lot to cover, okay? But if you have questions, we're going to have time for Q&A at the very end. Just hold on to your questions because it is impossible for me to monitor the chat while I'm in full screen. Just as a heads up and FYI, but hold on to them, write them down so you don't lose them, and we'll get to them. All right, so we'll skip over this. So today's overview, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to jump into the history of burnout also because it's so near and dear to Berkeley's heart, and I think it's neat for everyone here to know that. And really, what is stress inside of the brain and body? Biologically speaking, this is the stuff that you probably, like, doctors should talk to you about, but they just don't. But like, what is stress? We talk about it, it's this ethereal concept. It doesn't feel good, we know that. It has all these downstream negative effects, but what's really actually happening when stress is elicited inside of the brain and body? I'm then going to dive into the top 3 factors that drive burnout, practical frameworks to address each one at both the individual level and at the team level, organizationally speaking. And then I'm going to end with, I would say, one of my favorite topics, which is what's called the 3M framework for taking breaks. The 3M framework is actually one of the only research-backed methods of preventing burnout. You could have the most stressful job on the planet, but if you actually stick to the 3M framework, I assure you, you will not burn out. But we do need to stick to it. And there's some nuanced tips of how to actually do the 3M framework properly, because a lot of folks think that they're doing it, but it's not exactly right. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the history of burnout. So we're starting there. Dr. Christina Maslach, who I've been lucky enough to meet in person many times and chat with about burnout, actually made burnout famous in the 1970s, and she is a Berkeley faculty member. Dr. Christina Maslach made burnout famous by studying service workers in the 1970s, and I was always taken aback by her not only just sheer intelligence and wisdom on the topic, but also how brave she was as especially as a female faculty at that time, to stand on a soapbox where other folks were not really interested in hearing what she had to say on the topic. But this is really before burnout was even taken seriously. Dr. Maslach would stand on a soapbox and pretty much say, listen, I'm looking at these nurses, I'm looking at these ER doctors, something is wrong. This is not just run of the mill, oh, I'm stressed out, I need a long weekend, I could use a vacation. Their bodies aren't responding the same way. Their brains are, like, I'm telling you, something doesn't seem right. But lo and behold, year after year, and unfortunately, it took over 2 decades for us to get here. We now know that she was right, but it took a very long time for us to get there. The 3 different aspects, the 3 trends that she discovered in service workers specifically. 1, profound emotional exhaustion. Profound emotional exhaustion. 2 is a generalized negativity or cynicism. This is almost like wearing rose-colored glasses, but not really rose-colored, right? No matter what's going on, even if there's good news coming in, because of that emotional exhaustion, everything gets a negative filter. And 3 is feelings of professional inefficacy. Please note the word feelings here. Usually it is those that are the most professionally effective that have a tendency to burn out. And I think that's actually a neat factoid on the topic of burnout that I'd like you all to know. There are high performers, there are low performers, and there's folks in between. The closer you get to high performance or peak performance, the folks that are the highest achievers that knock it out of the ballpark, they are actually the ones that are more likely to experience burnout in their lifetime. And if you take a step back, you start to realize why. You can imagine if you're consistently not performing well or not meeting the mark, professionally speaking, you're kind of used to that. It's okay. There's all these deadlines, there's a bunch of pressure, and you're just like, whatever, it's fine. You don't really, you don't like, you're not losing sleep over your job. You're just like, it's all right. I'm trying my best, kind of. I put in like 2 hours of work, it's probably fine. And you just move on. Unfortunately, it's those that are the high achievers, the high performers that really wants to knock it out of the ballpark. They want to do well. They internally have very high standards, and they want to meet them no matter what. Those are the folks that suffer from burnout the most. And number 3, the third trend that we're seeing in the service workers, the feelings of professional inefficacy, is really honoring that internal standard that folks feel right before they suffer from burnout. It's here's how the bar, and here's how high it is internal to my own mind. This is my standard. I must meet it. It does not matter if I'm losing sleep. It does not matter if I'm falling apart. I got to meet it. And if you do not meet that perfect high bar, so you're just one rung below that, again, probably an entire like head and shoulder above the rest, but still my internal bar is up here and I'm not meeting my internal bar. Your feelings are of professional inefficacy. I don't think like I'm meeting the bar, whatever the bar might be. And that can also fuel, of course, generalized negativity and cynicism, et cetera. They're all connected to one another. Let's fast forward from Dr. Maslow's time. As of 2019, so right before the pandemic hit, burnout is now officially recognized by the World Health Organization as an occupational syndrome. This is really big news. The World Health Organization finally, with mounting evidence and research and science, finally said, wow, burnout is an actual syndrome. We can measure it. There are profound changes that happen inside of the brain and body. We get it. It's not just a feeling. It's not run-of-the-mill organizational stress or job stress. This is something markedly different. Now, let's jump into what stress is really. And I think it's rather important for us to demystify this process that we, quite frankly, all of us experience on a daily basis. So what is stress? First of all, something's got to happen. So some event needs to take place, right? Something's got to happen in order for you to be stressed out about it. But it's a little more nuanced. We need to decide to perceive that event as actually being stressful. What do I mean by that? There could be two versions of me, okay? Sahar 1 and Sahar 2. Now, Sahar 1 could get the same exact deadline from the dean, right? Dean Ann Harrison from the business school could come firing down and say, I need this by end of day today. I'm like, okay, I had a full day plan. Oh, sure. Two versions of me. One version that decides to perceive this event as being highly, highly stressful. The other version says, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's a part of the job. We got to be dynamic, right? It's fine. I kind of thought I was going to get X, Y, and Z done, but lo and behold, I guess we've got to swerve. Fun. Okay, pivoting. We're going to have to do this instead. One version does not perceive the event as stressful. One version does. You can imagine the version that does perceive the event as being stressful. It then kickstarts this entire process. We get activation of an area of the brain called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is the fear and anxiety center of the brain. It's walnut size, and it's in the very center of the brain, as you can see right here. It's a very old brain area, by the way. When we're talking about neural architecture and just what's going on inside of the human brain, all of the stuff in the middle, by the way, this is, I think it's just a fun factoid at this point. All the stuff in the middle, in the very center of the brain, is old stuff as it relates to evolution and neural architecture. The closer you get to the outside, which is called cortex, all of these fun folds, the closer you are to the outside, this is all new stuff. This is new in terms of human evolution. This is stuff that we develop. This is the stuff that really makes us human, which means the stuff in the very center, by the way, we kind of have in common with most other animals. Right. Earlier, I was talking to Candace and John and everyone else about like dogs and our pets and everything. I'm like, our pets have these things too. Everyone's got an amygdala. Which is what keeps us alive. It's survival. The amygdala is really the alarm center for the human brain. It doesn't really, it's not nuanced and it's definitely not subtle. It pretty much like you get activation of the amygdala and it's pretty much like sounding the alarm. It just goes beep, beep, beep. Something's wrong. We're stressed out about something. Fight or flee. Okay. Once you get activation of the amygdala and that alarm goes off, it sends a distress signal, that beep, 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 to the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus, as you can see in terms of architecture, also in the center, okay? Also pretty old area, not super, I would say, human, high level, I don't want to say intelligent or less intelligent. It's all a magnificent system that's highly elegant and beautiful. But the hypothalamus is also relatively simple in what it does. The hypothalamus is really the command center of the brain. It communicates with the rest of the body through the nervous system so that you actually have energy to do stuff. So pretty much your brain is saying, listen, I don't know what's going on. And by the way, really think about this in a nuanced way. 5,000 years ago, an emergency that would elicit this entire chain of events would be a lion, tiger, or a bear walking into my room right now. That's an emergency. Fight or flee, right? That is an actual emergency. But the thing is, 21st century, emails become emergencies. That's what's stressing me out. A phone call, a meeting that didn't go as planned. These are the modern day lions, tigers, and bears. These are the modern day threats to all of us. The problem is that the neural architecture that's responsible for stress, it doesn't know the difference between a lion, tiger, or a bear, or a crappy email for that matter. It's all the same because as I mentioned, the amygdala just goes, it's just an alarm. So it's as if your body will react as if a serious threat to your life just walked in. That's the unfortunate part. And this is why we're seeing burnout so high, because now instead of having one big deadline or one unusual meeting a week, we're having them multiple times a day. So we're getting those tiny little stress responses all throughout the day. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Going back to the hypothalamus, it's the command center. It goes, listen, hey, brain, body, it's an emergency. We got to go. I don't know what it is. It could be a tiger. It could be a cheetah. It could be an email. I'm not sure, but we got to go. Once the hypothalamus gets involved, it gets the adrenal glands activated that live on top of the kidneys right over here. And through hormones, specifically ACTH, you actually get activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which then activates things like adrenaline, epinephrine. These are hormones that get our bodies going. I'm sure many of you are familiar with adrenaline, but once you get that going on and some cortisol, then the fun starts. It's like the circus begins. You get increased heart rate, dilation of the bronchial tubes inside of the lungs. Your liver starts converting glycogen to glucose so that you actually physiologically have energy to do stuff. You also get an increase in blood pressure. And one, as you can see, one arrow is going down. Your digestive system actually shuts down, because who wants to digest a sandwich in the middle of an emergency? It's a fun fact. Now, the difference between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, the easiest way to remember this, by the way, think of a car. We're all cars and we're driving from A to B. I just need to get through my day. Sympathetic nervous system is that gas pedal that I was just describing. Increased heart rate, dilation of the bronchial tubes, increase in blood pressure, and no digestion. Go, go, go. It is the gas pedal. The parasympathetic nervous system, on the other hand, is like the brake. Rest and digest. This is what it's called in the literature. We call it the rest and digest system. Every arrow that you see going up here on the slide starts going down. And the one arrow that was going down goes up. So literally everything just gets flipped, okay? That's sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. As I mentioned before, previously we experienced stress in what are called short and complete cycles. That means a lion has just walked into my office and I go, uh-oh, and I hide, I flee. I can't fight it off. That's not really an option for me, but I do something. So an emergency happened, and then I get what? Amygdala, hypothalamus, nervous system. I'm go, go, go. I get to safety. Lion is no longer in front of me. Then what happens? I get to safety. I get to my family. I get to my house. I feel safe again. All of a sudden, we complete that stress cycle. You get rest and digest back again. You press the gas. The emergency is now subsided, and you're now pressing the brake. Ideally, in an ideal world, life is a beautiful symphony between the gas pedal and the brake pedal, just like in a car. If I need to get from here to Trader Joe's, let's say, ideally, I'm going to need both. If you just leave me with one pedal, I'm not going to be able to get there safely. So previously, evolutionarily, our bodies and our brain, stress is not bad, by the way. I should just take a step back and say this. Stress is good. If we did not experience cortisol, adrenaline, and stress, first of all, our performance would suffer. Second of all, our immune systems would suffer. I think folks don't know this. Yes, chronic stress is bad for the immune system, but acute stress is phenomenal for the immune system. If you do not experience stress in short little cycles, we do not feel good as a species. It is a natural part of what it means to be human. So stress is not something to be avoided. However, it is something to be completed. It's okay to be stressed out. It's normal and it's good for you. You just need to de-stress at the end of whatever stressful event that you wanted to just go through, right? So previously we experienced stresses and something's going on, I get to safety, and then we complete the stress cycle. But let's talk about what we're all currently dealing with. What does life look like these days? 21st century. There are no lions walking around unless I go see them on purpose. What does life look like? I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is I check my email. 15 million things have come in. I'm like, oh, okay, the circus begins, right? And then you see 3 things that you didn't even anticipate. You had sent a document the previous day. Now somebody's confused about it. They've scheduled 3 meetings with you. All of it becomes this avalanche. By the time you finished your breakfast, the avalanche has started. And don't even get me started on personal life responsibilities. For those of you who have children running around, there's 15 million things to do. So what ends up happening? Death by 1,000 paper cuts. That is my definition of burnout for you all. Burnout is very different from stress or trauma. Trauma and stress is at the result of one intense event. Something terrible has happened and you don't feel good about it. That's when you can, for example, take a few days to process and then come back fine. Burnout is not one big event. You cannot have one traumatic event. I've worked with a lot of folks, a few CEOs actually, that say, I think COVID has left me burned out. I'm traumatized by the event of I'm like, that's not how that works. You don't get to pick one event and one emergency and say that I'm now burned out. Burnout is death by 1,000 paper cuts. It is thousands of tiny little uncompleted stress cycles. It is getting that email, but you don't have time to deal with the email, do you? You got to jump into your first meeting. By the time you're done with that meeting, you have 2 more things that you've now added to your to-do list. You're like, okay, that's fine. We've delegated that. That's fine. I'll get that to you by tomorrow. And by the time you're like, okay, let me jump back into the email and deal with that uptick in cortisol that you got, that stress response that you see from that email you saw in the morning. You try to go back to it, but you're halfway through the email. You got to jump to your next meeting. Next meeting, you get another little stress response. And then more emails have come in, another one. And it just keeps inching up. We're just not completing the stress cycles. That's all. That's the difference between burnout. And that's really what causes burnout. So I'm going to jump into some of the, I would say, the seminal and I would say most interesting studies on burnout specifically that led to that 2019 decision by the World Health Organization to make it an occupational syndrome. In 2014, this particular study was looking at burnout, yes, on purpose. And they realized that if you take human beings, some folks who are burned out and some folks who are not, you put them in an fMRI, that's a functional magnetic resonance imaging device, okay? It lets us look into what's going on inside of the brain. We can see that those who are suffering from burnout, yes, have stronger negative emotions and have a difficult time modulating those emotions. Once they're upset, once they're stressed out, we show them a lot of negative images, and they're very, very negative, by the way. And they're there to unfortunately elicit those negative emotions because we want to see what it looks like in the brain and we want to see how folks deal with those negative emotions. So we say, wonderful, would you mind? I know that you're upset right now. It's a really terrible thing to have seen, but just try to keep yourself calm. Try to calm down now. And we see how long it takes them and what's going on inside of the brain and body while they do it. Now, here is an unexpected finding that happened at the end of the study, because everything I just said, it doesn't sound all that, it doesn't sound like rocket science here. It's like, yes, you're telling me people who are burned out have strong emotions and they have a hard time regulating them. Big whoop-de-doo. I think we could have figured that. What was interesting is that folks who were in the burnout group, we noticed, had larger amygdalas. Remember what I mentioned about the amygdala? It's a very old area of the brain. You shouldn't have bigger or smaller amygdalas. Folks in the burnout group had larger amygdalas than the folks in the control group. Uh-oh. The amygdala is the fear and anxiety center of the brain. Bigger means stronger. Bigger means more neural connections. I have an artistic rendition of a neural network behind me here. Bigger means more cells. Bigger means more robust. Why would the fear and anxiety center be robust? So then the researchers said, oh, okay, well, hold on a second. There's 2 options here. Option 1, some people are born with bigger amygdalas. And if you've got a really big amygdala that you're born with, then sure, you're more likely to be stressed out, don't you think? The area of your brain responsible for stress is huge. It's super strong and big. Unfortunately, those are the cards that you were dealt. And it means you're going to be more likely to burn out because you're more likely to be stressed in the first place. Option 2, which is the scarier option. What happens if that chronic stress, those little tiny upticks in cortisol that I was mentioning, that death by 1,000 paper cuts, what if it actually changes our brains? What if it actually makes the amygdala bigger in the first place? Uh-oh, let's keep looking further. Following year, more studies on seeing what happens when people are burning out. The frontal cortex, which is the area right here in the front of the brain, it's an area really that is the most human part of the human brain, right? I think it's the coolest, sexiest part of the human brain. It's the stuff right here that makes us higher order cognitive functioning. This is the stuff that allows us to think critically, make important decisions, etc. Patients who suffer from burnout actually show more pronounced thinning, specifically the medial prefrontal cortex, which is also responsible for our working memory, etc. So we not only see now an increase in size of the areas of the brain responsible for stress and anxiety, but we see a decrease, an atrophy in the areas of the brain responsible for decision-making, for cognitive control. It's starting to make sense now why it's more difficult for those suffering from burnout to control their emotions and to control that stress in the first place. So that stress center, that alarm just got louder, and the areas responsible for telling the alarm to calm down just got weaker. This is a recipe for disaster. So is burnout reversible? In short, burnout is a real physiological syndrome. It is to be treated like a medical condition. Changes are happening inside of the brain and body. But is it reversible? The good news is yes, of course it's reversible. But you need to give it time. You do need to treat it just like I know it's hard to see it. You don't always see it on the outside like you would a broken foot. But it needs to be treated just like a broken foot. The same way that you wouldn't expect next week after you've broken your foot to be running a marathon. You got to give it rest. You need physical therapy. You got to give it time. You need to be patient. It can take months to recover from burnout because our adrenals are exhausted. Those adrenal glands on top of the kidneys, all this entire system is exhausted from eliciting a stress response and then calming back down again. So now let's go into the good news, okay? The top 3 factors that really drive burnout and the practical frameworks to address them, okay? Top 3 factors fueling burnout during COVID. This is research that my lab was lucky enough to be able to do in conjunction with Asana. We surveyed over 13,000 knowledge workers from around the world and during COVID, and these are the top 3 factors that are fueling their burnout. First of all, being overworked, just having way too much to do in the first place. Second, not being able to switch off or disconnect from work. So even though it's the evening, even though it's the weekend, we're all stuck at home, it's COVID, everything is blurring together. I don't have a clear distinction between my work day and my personal life. And the third is a lack of clarity on tasks and roles, which has been markedly more difficult, of course, now that we're all remote. So I'm going to go through each one and we'll talk about a couple of things that can help each one of these factors. Zooming into the feelings of being overworked. I wish that I could come onto campus or come into your departments and give you less work to do. I don't have the authority to do that. So I can't take work off of your plate. However, what can we do and how can we educate ourselves to make the same amount of work feel less exhausting, feel less burdensome, at least to the mind and to the body, physiologically speaking? First and foremost, I'm here to tell you all that video meetings, our Zoom calls, are far more exhausting to the brain than their in-person counterpart. I see a lot of nodding. That's great. I know we've all felt it, but I'm here to tell you why and how. Microsoft came out with this research last year after they received, so Microsoft Teams, as you all know, is another video conferencing platform. They received a lot of complaints early COVID from folks that used to be able to do 25, 30 meetings in a day. These are typically senior sales, executives. And they're like, listen, I love a meeting. I'll meet with your cat. I'll meet with your second cousin. I'll meet with anything. I'll meet with my cactus. I love meetings. I love people. I'm super extroverted. But now I'm at meeting number 5. It's not even noon yet. And I'm absolutely exhausted over video. What gives? What is going on? So we were able to see, after looking at hooking a lot of humans up to electrodes, specifically EEG, this is electroencephalography, that we see a huge uptick in what are called beta waves in the brain. Beta waves are a marker of alertness and attention. They're a proxy for us to be able to measure how much effort our brains are putting into focusing and paying attention to the thing in front of us. During an in-person meeting, beta waves hover around this horizontal line right over here. So when we're on Zoom, when we're in our Zoom meetings, it's the same people, the same content, the same meeting. Beta is double the size within the first 30 minutes. That means measurably, literally, the brain is expending more energy. It is spending more energy to pay attention to the same information on video. And then something interesting happens at the 30, 40-minute mark. We see this massive drop-off in beta. This is video fatigue. After 30 minutes, our poor brains are all going, I'm tired. I'm tired of making all of this beta. It's been so hard for us to focus and pay attention, and I'm done. I'm tired. You've had enough. And then we see this drop-off in beta, which is why our lab has been, our new motto is 30 is the new 60. And thankfully, it's not about age, it's about meetings. Otherwise, 60 is the new 30. But 30 is the new 60 when it comes to video meetings, because truly, we're not getting as much out of ourselves or our people after the 30-minute mark. Everyone's brains are starting to exhaust. And I want to talk about the number one cause of this exhaustion. And that is looking at ourselves during the video meetings. I know you know what I'm talking about. On Zoom, we've had the distinct pleasure over the past year of looking at this sort of a Brady Bunch style gallery view of a bunch of faces and our colleagues. As a biologist, as a neuroscientist, I'm here to tell you there is probably nothing more deeply biologically unnatural than to be speaking to another human being. And while you're speaking to this human being, you can see your own image right next to them. So what do? Think of like, back in all of our younger, think of like a date that you might be on, like a hot romantic date. And instead of focusing on the person across the table from you at dinner, you've got a mirror. You've wheeled in a mirror and you put it on the table and you're trying to focus on them and what they're saying, but you just keep looking at yourself. You're like, I don't know, fixing your hair. You're like, oh my gosh, am I showing up right? And this is, by the way, fun fact, Botox sales have actually gone through the roof during COVID. And it's because people are horrified. They're staring at themselves all day. I'm glad I got a laugh out of some people, but it's true. And I'm here to tell you all, it is not vanity. If you have been wondering, because everyone's doing it. If you can see yourself, you're pretending to look at everyone else, but you're really just sitting there like, oh, wow. Really? Do my eyebrows look like that? Oh, no. Everyone's doing it. It's happening in the background. This is the number one cause of video fatigue and exhaustion at the end of the day when we're on video calls all day. Thankfully, our campus uses Zoom. Zoom was actually the first company to catch on to this. They have 3 neuroscientists, by the way, that work full time for them. And immediately within the first few months of COVID, we had enough data to say, uh-oh, Mayday, fix it now. And the engineers put something really neat here. When you hover your own image, you see this ellipses in the corner. I'm sure we're all familiar with it. You hit this ellipses, these 3 dots, and you see this drop-down menu, and there's a button now called Hide Self-View. Please do this for every meeting. I just need you all to know this. When you continue to look at your own image during a meeting, that is like 2 meetings in one. It's up to you. If you want to keep it on and keep staring at yourself, by all means. But then you're going to be doubly exhausted halfway through the day. So instead of being exhausted like you've just done a full day's work at 5, 6 p.m., you're going to feel that at 2 p.m. That is your decision to make. It is up to you. If you can be done with your job at 1, 2 p.m., congratulations. I'm very jealous. Let me know. I love to switch spots with you. But for the rest of us, we've got a full day. And I don't have the luxury of exhausting. You really need to think of the brain's resources as a finite amount. You wake up in the morning and you've got a finite amount of this brain mojo juice. It's a certain amount of energy. It's not infinite and it's very impossible to refill. The only thing that refills this thing is just going to bed the following evening and waking up again with a full, as much as possible glass. It's up to you. If you want to spend 2 sips on one meeting instead of 1, that's really the budgeting that is up to each person. But this is by far the biggest brain drain when it comes to video fatigue, okay? Now, I want to then dive into, remember, we're still on factor number 1, which is the feeling of being exhausted and the feelings of being overworked. That's what we want to focus in on here. Uncontrollable stress is far more toxic to the brain and to the body than controllable stress. Remember the 2 versions of myself that I mentioned before. Dean Ann Harrison says, Sahar, I need something by end of day. I'm like, okay, I had a bunch of things to do today, but fine. 2 versions of Sahar. One version that decides, it's a part of the job. I love it. It's great. It's fine. We'll pivot. It'll be great. Okay. I still feel in control. I say to myself, well, this was my plan for today. I was going to get X, Y, and Z done today, but now there's this unexpected request. Well, this was my plan. I am choosing to accommodate this request. Do you hear the language that I'm using here? I am choosing to accommodate this request. I'm choosing to accommodate this deadline. Let me take a look at my calendar and my priorities for the day and fit this in. I am manufacturing a sense of control in my own mind. Listen, at the end of the day, are any of us really in control? No, we all answer to somebody. And if we answer to nobody, we at least answer to ourselves. However, at the end of the day, I'm not in control of my day. If the dean actually wants something from me by end of day, I'm going to do it. But it's up to me if I decide when I get those requests that are unanticipated and unexpected for me to say, well, what is the point of making a schedule? What is the point of me having, organizing myself if one little thing can completely throw me for a tailspin and I just have no choice here? I decide to manufacture a sense of control into my day-to-day life so that I can avoid burnout, because that uncontrollable stress has been shown to be far more toxic to the brain. Humans love feeling in control. Now, the next piece is on physiological control. I want to teach you all how to do something called a down regulatory breath or a diaphragmic breath. This is the only type of breathing exercise that has been shown to deactivate the amygdala and to hit that brake on the nervous system. If you want a complete biohack, a physiological override for any type of anxiety or stress you might be feeling in your body, it is this kind of breathing. I do this at least 4 times a day, if not more. Doesn't take much. I do it in between my meetings. Sometimes if I'm on mute during a meeting and you can't hear me breathe, I'm doing this under the table. You can't see my stomach. It's fine. Like I'm doing this kind of breathing throughout my day. I shove it into my day anytime I can because I know what I'm doing is I'm completing those stress cycles. Remember, stress is not bad. Stress is okay. Stress is good. Stress is good for my immune system. My job is to make sure I'm completing those stress cycles. That's my job. The way that you do a diaphragmatic breath that hits that break is you inhale for a certain duration. I'm using the examples here, but you please customize it to your respiratory system, okay? If you're a runner or a swimmer and you have a huge lung capacity, increase durations. If you have asthma, decrease the durations. But the key to doing this kind of breath is to increase the duration of the exhale compared to the inhale. So you inhale to a count of 4, you hold, that's what the dots are, and then you exhale to a count of 5. Inhale for 4, hold, exhale for 6. Inhale for 4, hold, exhale for 7. You keep going until you can no longer go. When your exhalation lasts longer than your inhalation, you're activating the 10th cranial nerve inside of the brain and body called the vagus nerve. It's my personal favorite cranial nerve. I'm biased. I think it's a super cool nerve. It starts in the very center of the brain near the hypothalamus and the amygdala. It comes down the sides of the neck, by the way, near our carotid arteries, and it goes down in through the heart and all the way down into the gut. It innervates so much of the body and it's responsible for so much. And when you breathe only in this way, only in this particular way, increase the duration of the exhale compared to the inhale, you're activating that vagus nerve that calms everything down, okay? Remember, we're on the first factor. I feel overworked, I feel out of control of my life and the world around me and my job, and I'm stressed out about it. These are ways that you can start to manufacture a sense of control. First of all, turn off your self-view to make your meetings less exhausting in the first place. I need you to feel like you're driving your day even when you're not. Have a pad of paper next to you and make plan every hour. Say, what does the next hour look like for me? And if it changes, that's okay. You update the plan, but you're still in control here. And then, of course, including these breathing exercises throughout the day. I'm a huge fan of exhaler.com. I'm also a fan of Headspace. It's an app that you can download. Headspace is paid. Exhaler is completely free. I'm not like sponsored by any of these like random websites or apps or anything. I just use these myself. I think they're neat. What I like about exhaler.com is that it's a website so I can have it open on my browser as a reminder to take these breaths. And it does the counting for me. So I put in 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds. I tell it what I want it to do. I press go. And then it has this nice UI that says inhale, exhale, and it does the counting for me so I can just focus on my breath, okay? You can do it without the website and just do it on your own as well. Just wanted to mention the website because it works well for me. Next factor, not being able to switch off or disconnect at the end of the day. When we are, productivity, by the way, and the satisfaction when working from home really heavily relies on having a dedicated workspace. If we're working in our living rooms or we're working in our dining rooms or kitchens, our satisfaction is lowest and our productivity is also lowest. Why? When you wake up in the morning, your brain looks around the room and it looks at all the stuff around you. Mugs, my couch, my kitchen, my dog, my house, it's my home. Unless you have a long history of working remote and working from home, our homes are heavily cognitively associated with rest, relaxation, and sleep. If you think about the number, visualize a pie chart for me really quick. When you visualize a pie chart and you think about, zoom in on the hours that you spend at home, pre-COVID, all of the hours a day that you spend at home, zoom into that part of the pie chart. What are you doing when you're at home? What's the biggest slice of that pie? It's sleep. At least 6 to 8 hours we're spending in bed. You have to think about what that means for the brain. Your brain goes, oh, what is home for? Home is for rest. Home is for cooking and cleaning and dealing with our personal lives. It's not for focus or productivity or cranking through work or having an awkward conversation with your manager or a student. That's not what it's for. That is what our homes are heavily associated with. So since COVID started, again, unless you have a long history of working remote, our brains are electrically confused and really at odds with getting into a certain type of professional headspace. So the ideal here is to create those cognitive associations so that you can disconnect. I want you all to have your homes back where it's fully 100% your personal life, and then an entirely separate section of that home, which is for work, if you're going to continue working from home, which many of us are. The ideal, of course, to have is a separate private area, but not all of us have that luxury. If you're short on space, what I need you to do is to introduce a physical or sensory trigger into a location to pretty much start to create and design a cognitive association between that object or that sensory trigger and getting into a focus mode or getting into a professional headspace. What you can do, these are actually things I do myself. I have a focus candle. When it's time for me to work, I light my focus candle. When it's time, I don't light it when I'm doing presentations. I have different triggers that I use for that. I always wear the same turtleneck, by the way. If you ever see me, I'm sure you literally, I think it's kind of embarrassing at this point. If you Google me, it's like I have a uniform. It's because I don't want to think about it. When I have this on, this is my uniform that says to my brain, it's no longer time to worry about the puppy, the dishes, this or that. I need to focus on work. When I take this off at the end of the day, I leave this, put it away, out of sight, out of mind, and I put on a different shirt. I have my cognitive science mug that I've had since my undergraduate years at Cal, that actually my advisor helped us make these, by the way. So again, advisors are amazing all across campus. You all make the campus go round. This is the mug that I use during the daytime. I don't use this in the evenings or on the weekends. I refuse to use it then. I switch to an entirely different set of glassware, stemware, all of that stuff. I keep this in my office because I cannot have stuff that is associated with work and focus and productivity leak into the rest of my house. Even though I'm in an area where I do other stuff, I just put these things away. I put the mug away, I put the candle away, I take this off. And another thing that you can do, which is why I have the Spotify logo here, is start to invest when you're doing focused work, when you're not meeting with students, but if you're doing focused work, you need to crank through emails, whatever it may be, have a type of music that you listen to only when you're doing that activity. What's neat about music is that it's portable. So when we go back onto campus, you can take it with you. You can put your headphones in and you can listen to that same type of music. You're investing in an association. You're saying when this music is playing, then this is happening. This is the behavior that's happening. And over time, if you begin to invest in it, even if you don't feel like getting work done, that music starts playing and you're going to get into that headspace. You're going to enter that brain state automatically. Okay. The key to having these associations work properly is you have to be very disciplined with them. That means me being very disciplined about not using this mug outside of work hours. That means me being very disciplined about never listening to that music again outside of that context. So don't choose your favorite music. Otherwise, you won't be able to listen to it evenings or weekends. Okay. Now diving into the lack of clarity on tasks and roles, the third factor fueling burnout. Adam Karen, who is a UC Berkeley grad and an old student of mine, he's the head of product marketing over at Stripe. He goes through a daily ritual that I taught him in class, which is something called setting daily, what are called MITs. In Adam's group, if you're wondering why Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is on the slide, they call them their daily rocks. Okay, and they have the Rock, the professional wrestler and now actor, from what I've heard, as the mascot of this activity for their team. Their entire team across time zones have a daily ritual in their Microsoft Teams chat where they get in and they set what their most important tasks are for the day. Very beginning of the day, you start your day. Remember that control piece, that's where this came from. You want to empower yourself and your team to go through a daily ritual where you're setting yourself up for success, but more importantly, you're creating a sense of control. You ask yourself, okay, look at my calendar. You look at your to-do list. By the way, don't use it. Don't just rely on a to-do list. To-do lists are highly overwhelming and they create more cortisol than anything else. Look at your to-do list like a pantry or the grocery store. You go in there and there's a lot of stuff in there. I know there's a lot of stuff in there. I've seen your to-do list. They're like long and exhaustive. There's like way too many things to happen in one day on there. That's overwhelming. It's the pantry. You're not going to use every item in your pantry, are you? You go in and you say, I need to make dinner. Okay, what are you making today? You grab the items you need. You grab the bag of pasta, you grab this, you grab that, and then you take those items out of your to-do list, out of the pantry, and you put it on a new piece of paper. You put it on a piece of paper so that on these pieces of paper, guess what happens with these just cheap notepads? And don't bullet journal, don't have an elaborate to-do list or a pretty moleskin. Invest in one of these cheap notepads so that at the end of the day, you go, listen, today was a hot mess. It was a dumpster fire, whatever, the day is over. You crumple it up and you throw it away. Tomorrow is a clean slate. That's it. Every day when you wake up, ask yourself, what does success look like for my day today? What are my MITs, my most important tasks? Look at your calendar. How much time do you even have today? Rome wasn't built in a day. You're like, look at your meetings and you're like, okay, realistically, I only have actually about 2 hours of work to do. I have only 2 hours. So then look at your pantry and you say, great, okay, 2 hours of time. Well, what can I realistically even accomplish in that time? Then you go ahead and you go in and you say, okay, these are my 3 MITs. And remember, if the dean emails you and they say they need XYZ, you update this flight plan. And at the end of the day, you throw it away. When we did this with an entire company during COVID, not only did they have their most productive quarter in history by far, but we saw a 42% reduction in burnout. I know many of you were listening to what I was just saying, and you're like, Sahar, that sounds like a time management technique or prioritization. Why are we talking about to-do lists? I'm burning out. This is going to help you not burn out. I need you to feel like you're in control of your day and of your life. Humans need to feel in control. This simple habit in just 3 weeks for this entire company. Yes, you're going to see an increase in productivity. Hey, that's an added bonus. But more importantly, we see a massive drop off in burnout. Because again, two things. You're setting up what success looks like for the day. Stop looking at that massive to-do list. It's not getting done. You're pulling out the items you need and you can do. And no matter how the day went, I don't care if it was terrible, throw that piece of paper away. Tomorrow's a clean day. Leave it behind. Leave all of this stuff behind. The day's over. Walk away and go deal with your personal life. Now, really quickly, I'm going to go over the 3M framework. The 3M framework for avoiding burnout are 3 different kinds of breaks that you need to start taking today and this week and this month to avoid burnout. Again, you can have the most stressful job on the face of the planet, but if you take these 3 breaks, you will not burn out. Macro breaks. The frequency is monthly, half day to a full day, completely off. Meso breaks. Every week, I need you to take a couple of hours completely off. Micro breaks. The frequency is daily. For the matter of minutes, you need to be taking breaks. Breath. You might be saying to yourself, Sahar, we do have weekends, I should hope that on a weekly cadence, I'm taking 1 to 2 hours off. I have 2 days technically to take off. I know you all aren't taking them off. I barely take them off. What are we doing on the weekends? I'm cleaning my house. I'm running errands. I'm buying groceries. I'm meal prepping. That's what we do. We deal with our personal lives on the weekends. In order for these breaks to be effective, I'm not saying take them off and you're not checking your email. I'm saying that you need to completely psychologically detach. Psychological detachment is the actual key for taking each one of these breaks. I took a shower before jumping on to see you all. My hair is still wet. If I'm thinking about work while I'm in the shower, does that count as a break? No, it does not. I was reviewing slides that I was going to talk to you all about while I was in the shower. That doesn't count as a break today, now does it? Even I'm technically not working. It's technically not my work hours, but if I'm thinking about work, if I'm stressing out even about my personal life, it's not a break. The kind of break, when we talk about these 3 breaks, the 3M framework, I'm talking about you're drinking a Mai Tai on the beach in Hawaii, watching the sunset, and your phone, your children, your dog, no one can even reach you. You are off the grid levels of taking a break. And if you do that, I assure you, you will not burn out. And on that note, this is my personal email address. If you have questions, feel free to email me. If you like this kind of research, our lab is actually putting out new research summaries once a month, and you can actually use your phone's camera to scan this QR code. And if you're on Instagram, our lab also just started an Instagram. And on that note, I will open it up for questions. And if I can get some help teeing those up, that would be lovely.
Thank you, Dr. Yousef. We do have some questions that were coming through the chat, so I'd love to share those with you. Catherine C. asked, how do you differentiate stress and anxiety?
Ooh, they're almost one and the same. I will tell you, and it depends on who you ask in terms of definitions, because different labs, different professionals, different fields will even define these things as the same. Some will define it as the same thing. They're like, oh, it's just 2 synonyms, 2 words for the same experience. My humble opinion, you've got stress. That is more, let's go from the bottom up, actually. You've got stress. Stress it should be a part of every single day for a human being. Stress is not bad, again, as I mentioned before. Stress is good. Anxiety, not so great. Anxiety can be without reason. That is my definition of anxiety. Anxiety is something that persists both before and long after the stressor. So you have, when I talk to you all about that, what happens in the brain and the body when we experience stress, that is something happened. Uh-oh, emergency. I dropped my candle. I broke a glass. Oh, and then I have amygdala, hypothalamus, a little bit of that gas pedal and the brake. That's stress. You should experience that like 25 times a day. That's fine. Anxiety is, I broke the glass. It's 4 hours later. I've cleaned it up and I'm still shaken up about it. It persists. That's not healthy. That's not good. You didn't complete this. And if that happens over and over and over again, then you get burnout, which is the worst of the 3.
Kagendra Dunn asked, or she shared that short bursts of stress being good for us. and kind of that conversation that you were having earlier, talking about the gas and the brake and kind of completing the cycle. Cassandra asked, is that why some of us love amusement park thrill rides? Kind of that like burst and then that complete cycle.
There's no study actually that I know of that has been done on why some humans love roller coasters. That's a fascinating, Cassandra, join my lab. You could do that study with me. No, it's a fascinating question. I would gather that, well, in general, adrenaline feels good for some bodies. And I said something very nuanced. I realize sometimes my language as a biologist, I'm not saying some bodies, I'm saying some bodies. So depending on the number of receptors that you have and in your baseline hormones, adrenaline can actually feel really good, especially if you're a relatively calm, relaxed person. It can feel kind of nice to get a little bit of stress in the system. That's also probably the reason why some people like scary movies, for example, or thrillers. It's all kind of in the same bucket. Depending on your baseline of hormones, some of those things feel really good. So that would be my guess. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's because you complete it at the end. Like just like in a movie, it feels good to be scared, but at the end of it, it's just a movie, right?
Very interesting. Catherine C., who I think earlier asked the original question about differentiating stress and anxiety, also asked, any suggestions for people who might have a difficulty for shutting off their brains, especially at bedtime?
Yes, many. And I know we're going to be coming up on time. However, difficulty shutting off your brain in the evening. First of all, get yourself a notepad where I call it my parking lot. It is where I go and park all of those thoughts that I have before bed and in the evenings. One of the number one ways to address having any kind of rumination or what are called intrusive thoughts or interruptive thoughts. First of all, our brains are made to be interruption machines because they don't want us to forget stuff. And I think it's always helpful. You all are super intelligent people, and I think it's always nice for really smart people to know why something works. There's a reason why your brain is interrupting you and you have all of those thoughts at night. Your brain's just trying to help you. It's literally reminding you stuff that it believes that you will want to be reminded. It's doing work for you. Best thing to do is to just say, I hear you, brain. I hear you. Thank you for reminding me that. Let me write it down on a piece of paper that we trust and we know and we're going to keep nearby. And I'm going to write it down, and I promise we're not going to forget it. I've written it down. Do you see that? You feel that, don't you? That's wonderful. It's written down. We're going to come back to it. Tomorrow's a new day. But get it out of your head. This process is called externalization or cognitive offloading. But the idea is that our brains are not, we do not have an infinite capacity. So you need to get stuff out of your head and onto paper, out of your head and into another person. This is why therapists are really great, because you just get all the stuff out of your head out into the open. This poor thing is all of 3 pounds. It's amazing and magical. I study it. It's amazing in terms of its capabilities, but it's not infinite. You can't just hoard all of those thoughts in your head. You have to get them out of your head. And the best thing to do is put it on a piece of paper, because you're creating a trust system that we're going to come back to it. It won't get lost. Stop. You don't have to remind me when I'm laying down in bed. My second piece of advice, if you have trouble sleeping, by the way, and I'm lucky enough, we have Matt Walker on campus. He's a world famous sleep psychologist. And one of my good friends just happens, to also be a famous sleep psychologist from the Walker Lab. Piece of advice that can cost any one of us $5,000 if we go to like a famous sleep psychologist or sleep therapist to help us with this, but we can all get it for free now. Go Bears. If you do not sleep within 15 minutes of your head hitting the pillow, get out of bed. 15 minutes is the cutoff. Get out of bed, go sit in the living room, go sit in the darkness, go sit on the couch. I don't care where you're sitting, but get out of that bedroom. Your bed, remember what I mentioned about cognitive associations? What did I say about my turtleneck and my cup and all of these objects? This is what's associated with work for me. I take this off and I leave it behind. What happens if I take this turtleneck and I go nap? What happens if I take this turtleneck and I go see my mother and take care of her? Now, all of a sudden, this turtleneck, and when I put it on, my brain goes, oh, well, that's just the turtleneck we wear all the time doing all the things. It's not just work. It's all the things. Your bed, your comforter, your pillow should only be associated with, and I feel like I can say this, the 2 S's that are allowed in the bedroom, sleep or sex. That's it, okay? That's it. Those are the 2 activities you're allowed to do. Unless, of course, you don't have any trouble sleeping, in which case you're super lucky and good for you. But for the rest of us that have trouble sleeping and trouble falling asleep reliably and staying asleep, no reading in bed, no Netflixing in bed, no, making a to-do list in bed, no checking email in bed. Keep your phone outside of the room in another room. Leave all of that stuff outside so that you can start to train your brain so that when your head hits the pillow, your brain goes, oh, I know this location. Oh, I know this. I know exactly what's supposed to happen here. Sleep happens here, and it falls asleep. But if you've allowed yourself to think, to ruminate, to stress, to plan next week, to think about last week, to watch TV, to do all these other activities in bed, you get into bed, you turn off the lights, and your brain goes, hey, don't we have a meeting like on Thursday that we should probably worry about? It doesn't, our poor brains don't know the difference. They don't know what the rules are. It just goes, well, we've done this in the past. Well, surely I can remind you of all the things to stress out about next month now, right? It's the same. So anyway, it's about cognitive association. So that's my recommendation. Leave the phone outside the room. Get your thoughts out on paper, externalization, cognitive offloading, and give yourself 15 minute spurts of time to actually sleep. If it's not working, leave and then come back when you're tired.
Wonderful. So I think we have time for one more question. And John actually asked if there are any like task managers or to-do list that you can use on the computer. So any apps or websites that you recommend. I know that you have kind of like your scratch pad and your junk journal that you might be able to use, but anything electronic that you recommend that can help with managing tasks and navigating.
No, that's great. I can't say that I can like 100% endorse this. However, I have recently started using, during COVID actually, Asana, ASANA, and I believe they have a free version as well if you just want to use it as an individual, I believe. And it's I think both simple to use and highly effective, especially for a team. If you can get your whole team on it, I think it would be really, really phenomenal. I found it a little bit easier than most other task management systems that are digital. But having said that, I really, really urge you all to that scratch pad. I use Asana. I have a digital, I can't keep all of it on a piece of paper. That would be ridiculous. But I still go through this daily ritual. If it's not on a piece of paper, I do it on a whiteboard. But you got to pull that stuff out of it. So Asana is my pantry. But if I stare at that thing every single, multiple times a day, I'm overwhelmed because it's reminding me of honestly all of the crap that's not getting done. Like I don't have time between now and next Monday to do all this stuff. There's no reason for me to keep staring at it. It's really stressful and overwhelming. So every morning I just look at it and I go, look at the calendar, look at Asana, what is feasible today? And I pull out the 2 things and this becomes my statement of work for the day. And that's it. And I throw it away so I don't have to stare at it tomorrow.
Wonderful. And I just want to encourage everyone to do a real quick review of some of the things that were going on in the chat. There were some other suggestions, different books, yoga, different things. So definitely suggest checking out those. And maybe we can include that also in the recording and the slides that we'll share afterwards. But just want to thank you, Dr. Yousef, for your wonderful presentation. So many kudos and positive things in the chat about the presentation today. Also want to thank Susan, who's not with us today, and Amy for doing a lot of the behind the scenes work, and our fellow advising fellows. I know Ant-Man was very influential and in bringing this all together. So thank you all. Thank you, John, for kickstarting us today. Amy did put an evaluation in the chat box. So we ask that you complete that evaluation to those that were in attendance. And yeah, thank you, everyone. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you all. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you from the whole campus community for everything you all do. I promise you're changing lives, even though some of the students, I didn't have the wherewithal to know how much my advisors changed my life throughout the years, but they'll know it soon enough. So thank you.